The stagecoach wheels kicked up dust as Beatrice Olmstead pressed her face against the window, watching the Texas landscape blur past while her heart hammered against her ribs. She had stolen away in the dead of night with nothing but the clothes on her back and her mother's silver locket, running from a marriage her father had arranged to a cruel cattle baron twice her age who had already buried 2 wives under suspicious circumstances. The year was 1878, and women had few choices, but Beatrice had decided that death on the frontier was preferable to a living death in Marcus Thornhill's sprawling mansion. She had overheard the servants whispering about the bruises on his last wife's arms, the way she had grown thin and fearful before she mysteriously fell down the stairs. No amount of wealth or social standing could convince Beatrice to walk willingly into that fate. The stagecoach lurched suddenly, throwing her against the side panel. The driver shouted something unintelligible, and then the world became a chaos of screaming horses and splintering wood. Beatrice felt herself thrown through the air, her body tumbling across hard, packed earth before everything went black. When consciousness returned, the sun was lower in the sky, painting the Texas plains in shades of amber and gold. Her head throbbed, and when she touched her temple, her fingers came away sticky with blood. The stagecoach lay on its side 20 feet away, one wheel still spinning slowly. She could hear groaning from inside. "Help," she called out, her voice hoarse and weak. "Is anyone alive?" A man's voice answered from within the wreckage. "My leg's pinned. Can you get help?" Beatrice struggled to her feet, swaying as dizziness washed over her. She looked around at the endless expanse of prairie, seeing nothing but grass and distant hills. Then far off on the horizon, she spotted a thin column of smoke rising into the sky. "I see smoke," she called back. "There must be a ranch or settlement. I will go for help." "Wait," the man said urgently. "Take the rifle. Wolves and worse out there." She found the rifle lying in the dirt, checked that it was loaded though her father had never allowed her to learn proper shooting, and set off toward the smoke. Each step sent pain shooting through her left ankle, but she gritted her teeth and pressed on. The sun continued its descent, and she knew she had to reach help before darkness fell completely. The walk seemed endless. Her fine traveling dress, already torn and dirty from the crash, caught on scrub brush and cactus. Her ankles screamed with every step. But the smoke grew nearer, and eventually she could make out buildings, a windmill, the dark shapes of cattle in pens. She had nearly reached the ranch house when her ankle gave out completely. She fell hard, crying out in pain and frustration. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. Through the haze, she heard boots crunching on gravel, running toward her. Miss, can you hear me?" The voice was deep and concerned, rough with the accent of someone who had spent his life outdoors. Strong hands touched her shoulders, gentle despite their obvious strength. "Don't try to move. Let me look at you." Beatrice forced her eyes open and found herself looking into the most striking face she had ever seen. The man kneeling beside her was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and concern etched lines around his mouth. "Stagecoach," she managed to say. "Overturned, others hurt, need help." His expression shifted immediately from concern to action. "Miguel," he shouted toward the barn, "hitch the wagon fast. Bring medical supplies and rope. Stagecoach accident." Then those gray eyes were back on her, assessing her injuries with practiced efficiency. "I am Samuel Worthington. This is my ranch. You are safe now. Can you tell me your name?" "Beatrice Olmstead," she whispered. "My head hurts." "I see that. You have a nasty cut there. How is your vision? Seeing double?" "No, just dizzy." "That is good. Your ankle is swelling badly. I am going to carry you inside, and then we will go help the others. Is that acceptable?" The formal way he asked permission to help her, even in such dire circumstances, struck something deep in her chest. In her world, men simply took what they wanted, did what they wanted without any concern for a woman's consent or comfort. This rancher, this stranger, was asking. "Yes," she breathed. "Thank you." Samuel lifted her as though she weighed nothing, cradling her against a chest that felt solid as oak. She caught the scent of leather and sage, of honest sweat and the outdoors. He carried her up the steps of the ranch house and through the door, calling out as he entered. "Rosa, we have an injured woman. Prepare the guest room and bring water and bandages." An older Mexican woman appeared, her lined face creased with worry. "Ay, Dios mío, the poor child." "Bring her this way, Señor Samuel." He laid Beatrice on a soft bed with surprising gentleness. "Rosa will take care of you. I must go help the others from the stagecoach. We will be back as soon as we can." Beatrice caught his sleeve as he turned to go. "There is a man with his leg pinned." He sounded badly hurt. Samuel nodded, his expression grim. "We will get him out. Rest now." He was gone before she could say more, his boots echoing through the house and then fading as he left. Rosa bustled around the room, bringing water and clean cloths, clucking her tongue over Beatrice's injuries. "That ankle needs to be wrapped properly," Rosa said, her English heavily accented but clear. "And this cut on your head needs cleaning before it goes bad." "You are lucky Señor Samuel found you. He is a good man, the best I have known." As Rosa cleaned and bandaged her wounds with surprisingly gentle hands, Beatrice found herself wondering about her rescuer. The ranch house, though not luxurious, was well maintained and comfortable. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything spoke of a man who took pride in his home. "How long have you worked here?" Beatrice asked, trying to distract herself from the pain as Rosa wrapped her ankle. 15 years, since Señor Samuel was just a boy helping his father run this place. His father died 8 years ago, left everything to Samuel. He has worked so hard to keep it going, to treat everyone fairly, not like some ranchers who treat their workers like dirt. He seems kind. Rosa smiled, a knowing look in her dark eyes. He is lonely too. A young man should have a wife, children. But he waits for the right woman, one who will love this land as he does, who will be his partner, not his property. He has turned away many wealthy families who wanted to arrange marriages for their daughters. Beatrice felt something twist in her chest at those words. A man who refused arranged marriages, who wanted a partner rather than property. The contrast with Marcus Thornhill could not have been sharper. "There," Rosa said, tucking the bandage around Beatrice's ankle. "You must stay off this for several days. I will bring you some broth. You need to drink and rest." As Rosa left, Beatrice lay back against the pillows, her mind spinning. She could not stay here long. Her father would come looking for her, and Marcus Thornhill with him. They had connections throughout Texas, men who owed them favors or feared their influence. She had perhaps a week, maybe 2, before they tracked her to Fort Davis. Night had fallen completely when she heard the wagon returning. Voices drifted up from below, urgent and strained. Rosa appeared with the promised broth, her expression troubled. "They brought 3 people," she said quietly. "The driver died in the crash. May God rest his soul. A businessman has a broken leg but will survive. A woman traveling with her daughter has some broken ribs but is strong. The man who was pinned, his leg is crushed badly. Señor Samuel said it as best he could, but he will not walk properly again without surgery, and maybe not even then. We have sent for the doctor from Fort Davis, but he will not arrive until morning." Beatrice closed her eyes, guilt washing over her. If only she had been stronger, had reached the ranch faster, perhaps the man would not have suffered so long with his leg trapped. "This is not your fault," Rosa said firmly, as though reading her thoughts. The coach crashed. You were hurt too. You did what you could. Later, when the house had quieted and Rosa had gone to tend the other injured passengers, Beatrice heard a soft knock at her door. "Miss Olmstead, are you awake? May I come in?" Samuel's voice. Beatrice pulled the blanket up a bit higher, suddenly aware that she was wearing only her torn dress, her hair loose and wild around her shoulders. "Yes," she called. He entered carrying a lamp, its light casting warm shadows across his face. He looked exhausted, his shirt stained with blood and dirt, but his eyes were still alert and concerned. "I wanted to check on you before I cleaned up," he said, staying respectfully near the door. "Are you in much pain?" "It is bearable." "How are the others?" "Stable, all except Mr. Harrison with the crushed leg. I am worried about infection. The doctor should be here by mid-morning." He paused, studying her face in the lamplight. "Miss Olmstead, I do not mean to pry, but I noticed you have no luggage, no traveling bag. The other passengers had trunks and cases, but you had nothing." Beatrice felt her throat tighten. She had not expected to be questioned so soon, had not prepared a convincing lie. And looking into Samuel's honest gray eyes, she found she did not want to lie to him. "I left in a hurry," she said carefully. "I was running from someone. I hope to disappear into the frontier, perhaps find work somewhere far from home." Samuel pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, his elbows on his knees. "Running from the law? No, from a marriage. An arranged marriage to a man who has buried 2 wives already under suspicious circumstances. My father arranged it without consulting me. I am 21 years old, and I would rather die free than live as that man's property." The words hung in the air between them. She expected judgment, perhaps a lecture about duty and family. Instead, Samuel nodded slowly. "That took courage," he said quietly. "More courage than most people have. But you should know that if your father and this man are looking for you, Fort Davis is not so isolated that they would not find you eventually. This is a well-known town on the stage line." "I know," Beatrice said, her voice breaking. "I just needed to get away. I thought I would have more time to figure out what to do next." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he said, "There may be a solution if you are willing to consider something unconventional. I am listening. Texas law recognizes common law marriage. If a man and woman present themselves as married, live together, and intend to be married, they are considered legally wed after a certain time. However, there is also legal marriage by contract, which can be arranged quickly if both parties consent." Beatrice stared at him, not understanding where he was going with this. Samuel met her gaze steadily. "If you were married to me, your father and this man would have no legal claim on you. A woman cannot be forced to leave her husband, and under Texas law, I would have the legal right to refuse to allow them to take you. You are suggesting we marry, but you do not even know me. Why would you do such a thing?" He leaned back in his chair, a slight smile crossing his tired face. "I am 30 years old, Miss Olmstead. I have run this ranch since I was 22, worked myself nearly to death building it into something sustainable. I have turned away a dozen wealthy families who wanted to marry their daughters to a rancher with good land and no debts. You know why?" She shook her head, unable to speak. "Because every single one of those arrangements was about property and position. The fathers saw me as a way to secure their daughters' futures or merge their holdings with mine. The daughters saw me as a duty, an obligation to fulfill. Not once did anyone ask what I wanted, what kind of partnership I hoped to build. Not once did anyone suggest that marriage should be about choice and respect and the possibility of love." He stood and walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. "I am not proposing a romantic fairy tale, Miss Olmstead. I am proposing a partnership built on honest terms. You need protection and a new life. I need help running this ranch and would prefer a partner who chose to be here rather than one purchased through her father's greed. If we marry, it would be real in the eyes of the law, but it would be yours to shape as you wish. If you decide after a time that you want to leave, I will not stop you. If you decide you want to make a real marriage of it, I would be open to that too. Beatrice's mind reeled. This stranger was offering her exactly what she had dreamed of during those long, terrifying nights when she lay awake dreading her wedding to Marcus Thornhill. A choice. A real choice, freely made. You would truly let me leave if I wanted to, she asked. Even after we are legally married. I would. Though I would hope you might give it a fair chance first. This is a good ranch, Miss Olmstead, and I treat my workers well. Rosa has been with me for 15 years, Miguel for 10. I pay fair wages, I do not cheat on cattle sales, and I believe in honest dealing. I think you would be safe here, and perhaps even happy. Why are you really doing this? Beatrice pressed. There must be easier ways to find a wife than marrying a fugitive from an arranged marriage. Samuel turned back to face her, and in the lamplight, she saw something raw and honest in his expression. My father tried to arrange a marriage for me when I was 23, a young woman from a wealthy family, very pretty, very accomplished. I met her 3 times under her father's watchful eye. The last time, I asked her what she wanted from life, what dreams she had. She looked at me as though I had spoken in a foreign language. She had no dreams, no desires of her own. She had been trained from birth to be an ornament on some man's arm, to produce heirs and manage a household. I called off the arrangement, and my father did not speak to me for 6 months before his death. He crossed back to the chair and sat down again, his voice low and intense. I swore then that I would never marry unless it was to someone who had their own fire, their own will. You ran away from your entire life, from security and wealth and family, because you refused to let them extinguish your will. That tells me you are exactly the kind of woman who could be a true partner, if you chose to be. Tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like this, had ever acknowledged that her will mattered, that her choice had value. I do not know how to run a ranch, she said. I was raised to manage servants and host parties. I know nothing of cattle or horses or any of this. Rosa knew nothing of Texas ranching when she came here from Mexico. Miguel had never worked cattle before my father hired him. Everyone can learn. The question is whether you want to. Did she want to? Beatrice thought of the endless, suffocating parlors of her father's house, the rigid social calls, the false smiles and cutting gossip. She thought of Marcus Thornhill's cold eyes and the fear she had seen in his servants' faces. Then she looked at Samuel Worthington, at his honest, open expression, at the calluses on his hands from real work, at the way he had asked her permission before touching her, before proposing this marriage. I want to, she said. I want to learn. I want to choose this. A smile broke across Samuel's face, transforming it. Then we will send for the preacher tomorrow after the doctor comes. We will do this properly, with witnesses and legal documents. And Miss Olmstead, I promise you that every day of our marriage will be yours to choose. I will never force you to anything you do not freely give. After he left, Beatrice lay in the darkness, her heart pounding. She had fled one marriage only to accept another within hours, but this felt entirely different. This felt like stepping forward into her own life rather than being dragged into someone else's. Morning came with the sound of a rooster crowing. Rosa brought breakfast and helped Beatrice wash and change into a borrowed dress. The doctor arrived shortly after, a gruff older man who examined everyone's injuries with efficient thoroughness. He confirmed that Mr. Harrison would need surgery in a proper hospital to save his leg, and made arrangements for transport to San Antonio. The woman with broken ribs would heal with rest. As for Beatrice, he pronounced her ankle badly sprained but not broken and warned her to stay off it for at least a week. "And who might you be, young lady?" the doctor asked as he packed his supplies. "You do not look like a typical stage passenger." Before Beatrice could answer, Samuel appeared in the doorway. "She is my fiancée, Dr. Graham. The crash delayed her arrival, but we will be married this afternoon if you can spare the time to witness." Dr. Graham's bushy eyebrows rose. "Your fiancée? I had not heard you were engaged, Samuel." "It is a recent development. We have been corresponding for some months, but kept it quiet. You know how people gossip." The lie came smoothly from Samuel's lips, and the doctor seemed to accept it without question. After all, why would Samuel Worthington lie about such a thing? The preacher arrived at 2 o'clock, a thin man with kind eyes and a well-worn Bible. Rosa had helped Beatrice into a simple blue dress and pinned her hair up properly. Samuel wore a clean shirt and had shaved, looking younger and even more handsome than he had the night before. They stood in the ranch house parlor with Rosa, Miguel, Dr. Graham, and the preacher as witnesses. The businessman with the broken leg had been transported to Fort Davis earlier, but the woman and her daughter stood respectfully in the corner, watching with interest. "Do you, Samuel Joseph Worthington, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" Samuel looked directly into Beatrice's eyes as he answered, his voice steady and sure. "I do." "And do you, Beatrice Ann Olmstead, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" This was it. Her last chance to back out, to refuse, to run again. Beatrice looked at Samuel's face, at the respect and honesty she saw there, at the choice he was offering her. She thought of all the years she had prayed for exactly this, someone who would see her as a person, not a possession. "I do," she said clearly. "Then, by the power vested in me by the state of Texas, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Samuel stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate, giving her every opportunity to pull away. He cupped her face gently in his work-roughened hands and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was chaste but surprisingly tender. It lasted only a moment, but Beatrice felt something shift in her chest, a flutter of something that might, in time, become more than gratitude. Rosa wept happily as she prepared a small wedding supper. Miguel produced a guitar and played cheerful songs. Even the woman with broken ribs, who introduced herself as Mrs. Catherine Mills, seemed delighted by the impromptu celebration. "It is like something from a novel," Mrs. Mills declared. "A romantic rescue and a wedding in the space of 2 days. You are very fortunate, Mrs. Worthington." Mrs. Worthington. Beatrice tested the name in her mind and found it fit better than she had expected. She was no longer Beatrice Olmstead, daughter of James Olmstead and promised bride of Marcus Thornhill. She was Beatrice Worthington, wife of a Texas rancher by her own choice. As the evening wound down, Beatrice felt nervousness creeping in. Samuel had promised this marriage would be hers to shape, but they were legally wed now, and tradition dictated certain expectations for a wedding night. When Rosa showed her to the main bedroom, freshly prepared with clean linens and flowers on the dresser, Beatrice's hands began to shake. Samuel appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, carrying a blanket and pillow. "I will sleep in the chair tonight," he said gently. "Your ankle needs rest and you have been through an ordeal. There is no rush for anything, Beatrice. We have time." The relief that flooded through her was so intense she nearly wept. "Thank you. I know that this is unusual." "This entire situation is unusual," Samuel said with a slight smile. "We might as well make our own rules. I meant what I said. Every day is yours to choose. That includes this." He settled into the large chair by the window, arranging the blanket over himself. Beatrice climbed into the bed, acutely aware of his presence just feet away. But instead of feeling trapped or frightened as she had expected, she felt oddly safe. "Samuel," she said into the darkness. "Yes." "Thank you for giving me a choice. Thank you for choosing to stay." The next few days passed in a strange but pleasant rhythm. Beatrice's ankle healed slowly, and she spent much of her time sitting on the porch, watching the ranch work, and asking Rosa endless questions about everything from cooking to cattle. Samuel was unfailingly courteous, checking on her several times a day, sharing meals with her, but never pushing for more intimacy than she was ready to give. On the 4th day after their wedding, a rider arrived from town with a telegram. Samuel's expression grew grim as he read it. "What is it?" Beatrice asked, her stomach knotting with fear. "Your father and Marcus Thornhill arrived in Fort Davis this morning. They are making inquiries about a young woman matching your description who was on the crashed stagecoach. The telegraph operator thought I should know." Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. She had known they would come, but she had hoped for more time. Samuel knelt beside her chair, taking her hand in his. "You are safe. You are my legal wife. They cannot touch you, but they will come here, and we need to be prepared." "Are you ready to face them?" "I do not know if I will ever be ready. My father can be very forceful. I can be forceful too when protecting what is mine." He squeezed her hand gently. "You are not alone anymore, Beatrice. Whatever happens, we face it together." They did not have to wait long. The next afternoon, 2 men rode up to the ranch house on expensive horses. Beatrice recognized her father immediately, his face red with anger beneath his expensive hat. Marcus Thornhill rode beside him, his cold eyes surveying the ranch with obvious disdain. Samuel stepped out onto the porch, positioning himself between them and Beatrice. She stood behind him, her hand resting on the porch rail for support, her ankle still too weak for her to run even if she wanted to. "James Olmstead," Samuel called out. "I believe you are looking for someone." Her father dismounted with surprising agility for a man of his age and bulk. "I am looking for my daughter, who was reported to be injured in a stagecoach crash near here. The driver in town said she came to this ranch. Your daughter is here, safe and well. She is also now my wife. We were married 4 days ago by Reverend Mitchell, with Dr. Graham and several others as witnesses." The color in her father's face went from red to purple. "Married? That is impossible. She is promised to Mr. Thornhill here. I have a contract." "A contract that is worthless now that she is married to another man. Under Texas law, a woman's marriage supersedes any prior arrangements made by her father." Marcus Thornhill finally spoke, his voice like ice scraping across stone. "Let me see her. I want to hear from her own lips that she chose this farce of a marriage." Samuel looked back at Beatrice, his expression questioning. She nodded and limped forward to stand beside him, lifting her chin despite the fear coursing through her veins. "It is true," she said, her voice shaking only slightly. "I am married to Samuel Worthington by my own choice. I will not honor the arrangement you made, Father. I will not marry a man who has buried 2 wives already." "Lies spread by jealous gossips," Thornhill spat. "Your father promised you to me, and I paid good money for that promise." "My daughter is not cattle to be bought and sold," her father said, though his tone suggested he was not entirely convinced of this himself. "Beatrice, be reasonable. Come home. We can have this marriage annulled." It was made under duress, clearly. You were injured and confused. I was neither confused nor under duress, Beatrice said, and felt Samuel shift closer to her, a silent show of support. I chose this. I choose Samuel. I am staying here. You foolish girl, her father thundered. Do you have any idea what you have done? The scandal this will cause, the embarrassment to our family. I will be a laughing stock. Better a laughing stock than a murderer, Beatrice shot back. I know about the bruises on his last wife. I know about the fear in his household. I would rather die than become another one of his victims. Thornhill's hand moved toward his belt, and Samuel's hand dropped to the gun at his hip in one smooth motion. I would not, Samuel said quietly, his voice carrying a steel edge that Beatrice had not heard before. You are on my land and my wife is under my protection. You need to leave now. This is not over, Thornhill snarled. I know people. I have connections. I will make your life hell, Worthington. You can try, but my wife stays here and that is final. Miguel had appeared from the barn along with two other ranch hands, all armed and positioned strategically. Her father looked around, clearly calculating his odds, and apparently decided discretion was the better part of valor. Beatrice, he said, his tone shifting to something that might have been meant as cajoling but came out as bullying. Please think about this. You are throwing away everything, your inheritance, your family, your social position. For what? A dirt rancher in the middle of nowhere. Before Beatrice could answer, Samuel spoke. For choice, Mr. Olmstead. She is throwing it away for the right to choose her own life. That seems like a fair trade to me. Her father stared at them both for a long moment, then turned and remounted his horse. You are no daughter of mine, he said coldly. Do not expect to ever return home or receive a penny from me. I do not want your money, Beatrice replied and found that she meant it. I want my freedom and I have it now. The two men rode away, Thornhill looking back once with a gaze so full of hatred that Beatrice shivered. Samuel kept his hand on his gun until they disappeared from view. That went better than expected, Miguel said dryly from his position by the barn. They will come back, Samuel said. Men like that do not give up easily. We need to be careful for a while. But the days passed without incident. Beatrice's ankle healed, and she began to take more active role in the ranch. Rosa taught her to cook, not the fancy French dishes she had learned from her mother's cook, but hearty meals that fed working men. She learned to make bread, to preserve vegetables, to prepare beef in a dozen different ways. Miguel taught her about the horses, showing her how to read their moods, how to approach them, how to sit in the saddle properly. Her first attempts at riding were comically bad, but she persisted, and within 2 weeks she could ride well enough to accompany Samuel on short trips around the ranch. Samuel himself taught her about the cattle, about reading the land, about the delicate balance of ranching in Texas where drought and disease could wipe out a herd overnight. He spoke to her not as a child to be instructed, but as a partner whose opinions mattered. He asked her thoughts on which fields to rotate the cattle through, whether they should invest in new breeding stock, how to handle a dispute with a neighbor over water rights. At night, Samuel still slept in the chair, though Beatrice had begun to wish he would not. She found herself watching him during the day, admiring the way he handled the horses with such gentle confidence, the way he treated everyone on the ranch with respect, regardless of their position. She noticed how the lines around his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how his hands were always careful and precise, whether he was mending fence or helping a cow give birth. One evening, about 3 weeks after their wedding, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Samuel had been teaching her to read the weather, pointing out cloud formations that might signal rain. You have adapted well, he said. Rosa tells me you can cook almost as well as she can now, which is high praise indeed. I enjoy it. I never thought I would enjoy physical work, but there is something satisfying about making bread rise or helping deliver a calf. Back home, I was never allowed to do anything useful. I just sat in parlors and made polite conversation about nothing. Do you miss it? The easy life. Beatrice thought about the question seriously. I miss my mother sometimes, though she never stood up to my father. I miss my younger sister, but the life itself? No. I do not miss feeling like a decorative object waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. Samuel was quiet for a moment, then said, "You do not have to be sold to anyone, Beatrice. You have value far beyond what any man could pay. I hope you know that." She turned to look at him, at his profile in the fading light. "You have been so patient with me, so kind. I do not think I have properly thanked you for that. You do not need to thank me for treating you with basic decency. That should be the standard, not the exception." "But it is the exception," Beatrice said softly. "Most men are not like you, Samuel. Most men would have insisted on their marital rights regardless of my feelings. Most men would not have slept in a chair for 3 weeks to give their wife time to adjust." He turned to face her fully, his gray eyes serious. "Most men are fools then. Beatrice, I need you to understand something. When I proposed this marriage, I meant every word I said. I want a partner, not a possession. And yes, I find you beautiful and intelligent and fascinating. And yes, I would very much like for this to become a real marriage in every sense. But only when you want that too. Only when you choose it freely." Beatrice felt her heart race. She thought about how she had felt when he kissed her at their wedding, that flutter in her chest. She thought about how she watched for him during the day, how his smile could make her own face light up, how she had begun to resent that chair by the window because it kept him at a distance. "What if I told you that I am starting to want that?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I told you that I have been thinking about you, about us, about what this marriage could become?" Samuel reached out slowly and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Then I would say that I have been thinking the same things. But I would also say that there is no rush. We have the rest of our lives to figure this out. I know. But I do not want you to sleep in that chair anymore. It looks terribly uncomfortable, and you work so hard during the day. You should have a proper rest." A smile tugged at his lips. "Are you inviting me to share the bed, Mrs. Worthington?" "I am. Just to sleep for now, but I think I would like you closer." That night they lay in the bed together, a respectful distance between them but sharing the same space. Beatrice found she could hear his breathing, steady and calm, and it soothed her in a way she had not expected. In the middle of the night, she woke to find that they had drifted together in sleep, her back pressed against his chest, his arm draped carefully over her waist. She should have felt trapped or frightened. Instead, she felt safe. The weeks that followed brought a deepening of their connection. They worked side by side during the day, learning each other's rhythms and habits. At night, they lay together and talked about everything: their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Samuel told her about his father's death, about the overwhelming responsibility of keeping the ranch going, about his determination to build something sustainable that would last beyond his own lifetime. Beatrice told him about her mother's quiet desperation, trapped in a loveless marriage. She told him about her sister, only 16, who would likely face the same fate she had escaped. She told him about the books she had read in secret, the stories of adventure and independence that had made her believe another life was possible. "Would you write to your sister?" Samuel asked one night. "Let her know you are safe. She must be worried. I am afraid my father would intercept the letter. What if we sent it through someone he would not suspect? The doctor goes to Austin regularly. He could post it from there." So Beatrice wrote to her sister, carefully explaining that she was safe, married, and happy. She described the ranch and the work she was learning, painting a picture of a life very different from the one their father had planned for her. She urged her sister to be brave, to remember that there were always choices, even when it seemed there were none. 2 weeks later, a response arrived via Dr. Graham's return from Austin. Her sister wrote that their father had been furious about the failed marriage arrangement, but that the scandal had died down more quickly than expected. Marcus Thornhill had quietly left for California, and there were whispers that he was being investigated for something related to his late wife's death. Her sister also wrote that their mother had smiled for the first time in months when she learned Beatrice was safe. "I am glad," Samuel said when Beatrice shared the letter with him. "You deserve to have family who care about you." "I have family here," Beatrice said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "Rosa and Miguel feel more like family than most of my blood relatives ever did. And you are my family now." He looked at her with such warmth that she felt her breath catch. "And you are mine." That night when they lay together in the darkness, Beatrice rolled over to face him. "Samuel, I need to tell you something. I am listening. When we married, you said this could be whatever I chose to make of it. You said that if I wanted a real marriage, you would be open to that. I remember. I want that. I want a real marriage with you, not because I feel obligated or because I am grateful, though I am grateful, but because I have come to care for you. Because when you smile at me, my whole day feels brighter. Because I admire your strength and your kindness and your integrity. Because I think I am falling in love with you." She felt him go very still beside her. Then he reached out and cupped her face in his hand, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with infinite tenderness. "Beatrice, I have been in love with you since the day you limped onto my ranch, bleeding and hurt but still fierce enough to demand help for the others before yourself. I have been in love with you through every evening we have talked. Every morning I have watched you throw yourself into learning this life. Every moment I have seen your courage and compassion and brilliance. I did not say anything because I wanted you to have time, to be sure of what you wanted. But I have been in love with you for weeks now." She felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears this time. "Then why are we waiting?" Samuel leaned in and kissed her, not the chaste kiss of their wedding, but a real kiss, deep and passionate and full of all the feelings they had been holding back. Beatrice kissed him back with equal fervor, wrapping her arms around his neck, pressing closer to him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "Are you absolutely sure? I need you to be sure." "I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I choose this. I choose you. I choose us." What followed was tender and beautiful. Samuel moving with careful attention to her comfort, asking permission with every new touch, making sure she wanted everything that happened between them. Beatrice felt cherished in a way she had never imagined possible, felt her body respond to his with a passion she had not known she possessed. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That was nothing like what I expected," she said softly. "Good different or bad different, wonderful different. My mother told me that marital relations were something women had to endure. She made it sound like a duty, an unpleasant obligation." Samuel kissed the top of her head. "Your mother was married to a man who saw her as property. What we just shared, that is what happens when two people choose each other freely, when they care about each other's pleasure as much as their own. That is what real love looks like. I love you, Samuel Worthington." "I love you too, Beatrice Worthington." The seasons changed and their love deepened. Beatrice became a true partner in running the ranch, her suggestions and observations proving invaluable. She had a gift for managing the financial side of things, keeping the books balanced and finding ways to maximize their profits without cheating anyone. Samuel's respect for her grew alongside his love, and she knew she had found something rare and precious. In late autumn, nearly 6 months after their wedding, Beatrice realized she had missed her monthly courses twice in a row. Rosa noticed her pallor in the mornings and her increased appetite at other times and smiled knowingly. "You are with child," Rosa said matter-of-factly one morning. "I have seen this too many times not to recognize the signs." Beatrice felt a mixture of joy and terror. A child. She had not thought much about children, had been too focused on learning her new life and falling in love with her husband. But now, thinking about a baby growing inside her, she felt overwhelming happiness. She waited until dinner to tell Samuel, rehearsing the words in her head all afternoon. When they sat down to eat, she could barely touch her food. "Are you feeling well?" Samuel asked with concern. "You have barely eaten." "I am fine. Actually, I am better than fine. Samuel, I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." He went completely still, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Then a smile broke across his face that was brighter than the sun. "Truly, you are certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor's confirmation. But Rosa is sure, and she has helped deliver more babies than I can count." Samuel pushed back from the table and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with joyful enthusiasm. "A baby! We are going to have a baby!" "Beatrice, you have made me the happiest man in Texas. You do not think it is too soon? We have only been married 6 months. Too soon? No, this is perfect. This is everything I dreamed of but never thought I would have." He placed a hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our child. Made from love and choice and everything good." Dr. Graham confirmed the pregnancy 2 weeks later, pronouncing Beatrice healthy and strong and likely to deliver in late May. Samuel became even more protective than before, worrying about her riding or lifting anything heavy. Beatrice tolerated his fussing with good humor, knowing it came from love. Winter in Texas was milder than the winters she had known in the East, but there were still cold days and occasional snow. Beatrice spent much of the winter sewing baby clothes and preparing the small room next to their bedroom as a nursery. Rosa helped her, sharing stories of her own children, grown now and working ranches of their own. "You will be a good mother," Rosa told her one afternoon as they worked on a tiny quilt together. "You have a kind heart and a strong will. Those are the things children need most." "I am terrified," Beatrice admitted. "What if I do not know what to do? What if I make mistakes?" "All mothers make mistakes. The trick is to love them enough that they forgive you for the small ones and to try hard enough that you avoid the big ones. And you have Samuel. He will be a wonderful father." Spring brought new calves and longer days and Beatrice's growing belly. She moved more slowly now. Her center of gravity shifted, but she was still involved in the ranch work as much as she could be. Samuel had built her a chair on the porch where she could sit and watch the work, calling out instructions or answering questions, staying involved even when her body needed rest. In early May, her sister sent word that she had refused an arranged marriage her father had tried to force on her, inspired by Beatrice's example. Their father had been furious, but had finally backed down when her sister threatened to run away as Beatrice had done. She was now working as a teacher in Austin, supporting herself and loving her independence. "You gave her courage," Samuel said when Beatrice showed him the letter. "You showed her another way was possible. I wish I could see her, tell her in person that I am proud of her. Then invite her to visit after the baby is born. We have room, and I would like to meet the woman brave enough to stand up to your father." The baby came on a warm evening in late May, when the sky was painted in shades of pink and gold. Beatrice labored through the night with Rosa, and a midwife from town attending her. Samuel pacing outside the door and refusing to leave despite Rosa's insistence that he go get some rest. The pain was intense, worse than anything Beatrice had imagined, but she focused on Rosa's encouragement and the knowledge that at the end of this struggle she would hold her child. Finally, as dawn broke over the Texas plains, a baby's cry filled the room. "A boy," the midwife announced. "A strong, healthy boy." They placed him in Beatrice's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, red, wrinkled face of her son and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. He had Samuel's gray eyes and a surprising amount of dark hair. "Can my husband come in now?" she asked, unable to tear her gaze from the baby's face. Samuel entered the room tentatively, his expression awed. When he saw the baby in her arms, tears streamed openly down his face. "We have a son," Beatrice said, smiling despite her exhaustion. "We have a beautiful son." Samuel sat carefully on the edge of the bed and reached out to touch the baby's tiny hand. The infant's fingers curled automatically around Samuel's thumb, and Samuel made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I cannot believe how lucky I am." They named him James Samuel Worthington, James after Beatrice's father in a gesture of forgiveness, and Samuel for his father. Little James was an easy baby, sleeping reasonably well and nursing without difficulty. Samuel doted on him, getting up in the night to bring him to Beatrice for feeding, changing his diapers without complaint, singing to him in a surprisingly pleasant voice. Beatrice's sister Sarah arrived in July, taking the stage from Austin to Fort Davis and then riding out to the ranch with Miguel's son Carlos as escort. She swept Beatrice into a fierce hug, both women crying and laughing at once. "You look so different," Sarah said, holding Beatrice at arm's length to study her. "Happier, stronger. You look like you belong here." "I do belong here. This is my home now, truly my home in a way Father's house never was." Sarah stayed for 3 weeks, falling in love with the ranch and with baby James. She and Samuel got along famously, bonding over their shared love of books and their mutual opinion that James Olmstead was a stubborn fool. Samuel suggested that Sarah might want to consider teaching in Fort Davis, which was growing and could use a good school teacher. "I would love to be close to my sister and nephew," Sarah said thoughtfully. "Let me finish my contract in Austin, and perhaps I could come for the next school year." After Sarah left, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. James grew quickly, smiling and cooing and becoming the center of their world. The ranch prospered, Samuel's careful management and Beatrice's financial acumen combining to make it one of the most successful operations in the region. On their first wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Beatrice with a gift: a beautiful chestnut mare, gentle and well-trained, perfect for her to ride again now that she had recovered from childbirth. "Her name is Starlight," Samuel said, leading the horse to where Beatrice stood on the porch. "She is yours to ride wherever you want to go. You are not trapped here, Beatrice. You never have to be trapped anywhere again." Beatrice threw her arms around his neck, kissing him soundly. "I am not trapped. I am exactly where I choose to be, but I love the gesture and I love you." "I love you too. Happy anniversary, my dear wife." 2 years after James was born, Beatrice found herself pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect and was less frightened. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and when her time came, she delivered a baby girl with her mother's golden hair and Beatrice's own blue eyes. They named her Caroline Rose, and she proved to have a temperament as fierce as her mother's. Samuel joked that they would have their hands full when she grew old enough to have opinions, and Beatrice laughed and agreed. Sarah had indeed moved to Fort Davis and was teaching at the school there. She visited the ranch often, becoming a beloved aunt to both children. She brought news from town, stories of new families settling in the area, of progress and growth. One Sunday afternoon, when James was 4 and Caroline was 2, they all went on a picnic by the creek that ran through Samuel's property. Beatrice spread a blanket while Samuel helped James climb trees and Caroline toddled after butterflies, shrieking with delight when she caught one only to let it go immediately. You ever think about how different your life might have been? Sarah asked as she and Beatrice watched Samuel play with the children. If you had not run away, if you had married that horrible man, I try not to, Beatrice said honestly. I would not have survived that marriage, Sarah. I truly believe that. Either I would have died in some suspicious accident like his other wives, or I would have withered away to nothing, all the life drained out of me. Instead you have this. A husband who adores you, 2 beautiful children, a home you have built with your own hands and heart. Instead I have everything I ever dreamed of but never believed I could have. I have freedom and love and purpose. I have a true partnership with a man I respect and adore. I have children who will grow up knowing that their mother chose this life, that they were born from love and not duty. Samuel looked over at them and smiled, that smile that still made Beatrice's heart skip a beat even after years of marriage. He called out to her, "Come join us. James wants to show you the frog he found." Beatrice stood, brushing off her skirt, and walked over to her family. James held up a small frog triumphantly, his face glowing with pride. Caroline grabbed at it with sticky fingers, and Samuel laughed as he redirected her toward a less fragile toy. This was her life now. Not the life her father had planned, not the life society had expected, but the life she had chosen. Every morning she woke up in Samuel's arms, and every morning she chose to be there. Every day she worked the ranch, raised her children, built her future, and every day it was her choice. Years passed, bringing more children, a 3rd son they named Thomas, and then finally another daughter, Eliza. The ranch continued to prosper, and Samuel's reputation as a fair, honest rancher grew. He was elected to various positions in Fort Davis, helping to shape the growing town's future. Beatrice worked alongside him in everything, her opinion valued and respected. James Olmstead eventually reached out through Sarah, asking to meet his grandchildren. It took Beatrice a long time to agree, but Samuel supported whatever decision she made. When her father finally came to visit, he was a smaller, older man than she remembered, diminished by time and perhaps by regret. "You have built something good here," he admitted as they sat on the porch watching the children play. "I was wrong about many things, Beatrice. I thought security and wealth were all that mattered. I did not understand that freedom and choice had value too." "I hope you have learned to give Sarah the same freedom," Beatrice said coolly. "I have. She is a teacher, independent and stubborn as you are. And happier than she ever was in my house." He paused, looking uncomfortable. "Marcus Thornhill died last year, pneumonia, but there were questions, investigations about his wives' deaths. You were right about him." "I know I was right. I could see it in his eyes." Her father left the next day, and though they maintained a cordial correspondence afterward, they would never have a truly close relationship. But Beatrice found she could forgive him, could understand that he had been shaped by his own upbringing, his own limited understanding of what mattered in life. Samuel's hair began to gray at his temples, and Beatrice found she loved him even more with the passage of time. They had built a life together based on mutual respect and genuine affection, and it had only deepened over the years. They still talked late into the night, still made each other laugh, still desired each other with a passion that surprised them both. Their children grew strong and capable. James showed a gift for working with horses and talked about starting his own ranch someday. Caroline proved to have a brilliant mind for business and kept the ranch's books from the age of 12, catching errors that even Beatrice missed. Thomas loved the land itself, studying everything about crops and soil and weather patterns. Eliza, the youngest, had her father's gentle strength and her mother's fierce will, a combination that promised great things. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Beatrice riding to the top of the highest hill on their property. They dismounted and stood looking out over the land they had built together, the house and barns and corrals, the cattle grazing peacefully, the green fields sustained by careful irrigation. "You remember that first night?" Samuel asked, taking her hand. "When I proposed this marriage and promised you it would be built on choice. I remember every word. You gave me my life back, Samuel." "No," he said, turning to face her. "You gave yourself your life back. You were the one brave enough to run, to choose freedom over security. I just offered you a safe place to land. Everything you have built here, you built through your own strength and will." Beatrice kissed him, a long, sweet kiss that still sent shivers down her spine after 20 years. "We built it together. I could not have done any of this without you." "I love you, Beatrice Worthington. I have loved you since the day you stumbled onto my ranch, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond. I love you too. Thank you for giving me a choice. Thank you for giving me a life." They stood together on that hill as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Two people who had found each other by chance and built something beautiful by choice. Below them, their children were gathering for the anniversary dinner Rosa was preparing, their voices carrying on the evening breeze. This was happiness, Beatrice thought. Not the glittering, false happiness of her father's world, but the real, solid happiness of a life built on honest foundations. She had fled one marriage and found another, but the difference was everything. This marriage was not a cage but a partnership. This love was not demanded but freely given. As they rode back down to the house, Beatrice looked over at Samuel and smiled. She had been fleeing a forced marriage when she crashed into his life. He had proposed one built on choice and love. And together, they had created something that would last not just their lifetimes but generations beyond. Their grandchildren would play in these fields. Their legacy would be not just land and cattle, but the values they had instilled in their children. That every person deserved to choose their own path, that love mattered more than duty, that partnership was stronger than possession. The evening passed in celebration, their children and friends gathering to honor the marriage that had become a model for what love could be. Rosa and Miguel were there, now elderly but still sharp and involved in the ranch. Sarah came from town with her husband, a gentle school teacher she had married 3 years earlier. Even some of the town officials came, people Samuel had worked with over the years, all of them offering toasts and congratulations. "To Samuel and Beatrice," Miguel said, raising his glass. "Who proved that the best marriages are built not on arrangements but on respect and love. To choices freely made," Sarah added, "and to a sister who was brave enough to make them." As the party wound down and guests departed, Beatrice and Samuel sat on the porch swing, her head resting on his shoulder. The Texas stars blazed overhead, countless and brilliant. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked softly. "About that girl who jumped off a stagecoach and walked across the prairie with a sprained ankle, terrified but determined. She seems like a lifetime ago. She was brave. She is still brave. She is sitting right here beside me. We have been blessed, haven't we? Not just with prosperity, but with real happiness. We have been blessed, but we also worked for it, chose it, built it together. That makes it even more precious." Inside the house, they could hear their children settling down for the night, Caroline reading to Eliza, James and Thomas arguing good-naturedly about something. The sounds of family, of home, of a life well lived. Years continued to pass, bringing inevitable changes. Rosa died peacefully in her sleep at 83, mourned by everyone who had known her. Miguel followed her 2 years later, his children and grandchildren surrounding him. Samuel and Beatrice ensured both were buried on the ranch they had helped build, their graves tended and honored. James married a woman he met in Fort Davis, a rancher's daughter with her own fierce independence. They settled on land adjacent to Samuel's ranch, expanding the Worthington holdings. Caroline shocked everyone by moving to San Antonio to start a business importing goods from back east, proving just as successful in commerce as she had been with the ranch books. Thomas took over more and more of the daily ranch operations as Samuel grew older, showing the same careful stewardship his father had always practiced. Eliza became a teacher like her Aunt Sarah, eventually taking over the Fort Davis school and expanding it to include education for girls beyond basic reading and writing. Samuel's hair went from gray to white, and arthritis slowed his movements, but his mind stayed sharp, and his love for Beatrice never wavered. She too showed the marks of age, but she carried herself with a grace and confidence that made her beautiful at 60 as she had been at 21. On their 40th anniversary, all their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. There were 15 grandchildren by then, ranging from newborn twins that Thomas's wife had just delivered to James's oldest son, who was already 17 and working his father's ranch. "Tell us the story," the grandchildren begged as they always did. "Tell us how Grandma and Grandpa met." So Samuel and Beatrice told the story together, taking turns with the parts they knew best. They told about the stagecoach crash, the desperate walk across the prairie, the marriage proposal that was really an offer of partnership. They told about facing down Beatrice's father and the cruel man who thought he had purchased her. They told about learning to run the ranch together, about choosing each other every single day. "The most important thing," Beatrice said, looking around at all the young faces, "is that you always have choices. They might not be easy choices, and sometimes the right choice is terrifying, but you always have them. Never let anyone tell you that you must do something you believe is wrong just because it's expected. And when you marry," Samuel added, his hand finding Beatrice's as it always did, "marry for love and respect. Marry someone who sees you as a partner, not as property. Marry someone who values your choices as much as their own. That is the only foundation strong enough to build a life on." The grandchildren listened raptly, as they always did. Some were old enough to understand the full significance of the story, old enough to see how radical their grandparents' choices had been. Others just loved the romance of it, the adventure, and the happy ending. As the celebration continued, Beatrice found herself standing on the porch looking out over the ranch once more. Samuel came to stand beside her, moving more slowly these days but still strong. 40 years, she said softly. "Has it really been 40 years?" 40 of the best years of my life, Samuel replied. "Though I confess, they have gone faster than I would have liked. We should have decades more. The doctor says we are both healthy for our age. Then we will have decades more of choosing each other, my love. I will never tire of that." They did have more years, blessed years filled with more grandchildren and then great-grandchildren. They saw Fort Davis grow from a frontier town into a proper city. They saw Texas change and develop, saw progress and setbacks, saw the world transform around them. Through it all, they stayed rooted in the life they had built together, in the values they had established. The Worthington Ranch became known not just for its success, but for how it was run, with fairness and respect for everyone who worked there. Samuel and Beatrice set an example that influenced the entire region, showing that prosperity and principles could coexist. When Samuel finally died at the age of 85, surrounded by his family, his last words were to Beatrice. "Thank you for choosing me," he whispered. "Thank you for a life beyond my dreams." Beatrice held his hand as he slipped away, tears streaming down her face, but also feeling profound gratitude for the decades they had shared. She had chosen him, yes, but he had chosen her too, had given her the space and support to become fully herself. She lived another 5 years after Samuel's death, years spent with her children and grandchildren, years spent passing on the stories and lessons of her life. She ensured that the ranch would stay in the family, managed according to the principles she and Samuel had established. She made sure her granddaughters knew they had choices, that they could forge their own paths as she had. When Beatrice died peacefully in her sleep at age 90, she was buried beside Samuel on the hill overlooking the ranch. Their graves were marked with simple stones that bore an inscription their children had chosen together: Samuel and Beatrice Worthington. They built a life on choice and love, and it was enough. The ranch continued for generations, always in Worthington hands, always run according to the values Samuel and Beatrice had established. Their story became family legend, told and retold, inspiring their descendants to value freedom and choice, to build partnerships rather than hierarchies, to choose love over duty. And in quiet moments when the wind blew across the Texas plains and the sun set in brilliant colors over the land they had loved, it was easy to imagine that their spirits were still there, still choosing each other, still showing by example what true love looked like. The legacy they left was not just land or wealth, though they left both. Their true legacy was the proof that a life built on free choice and genuine partnership could flourish, could create happiness that lasted beyond any individual lifetime. They had shown that love was not about possession or duty, but about two people choosing each other, every day, with full freedom and full hearts. Their story began with Beatrice fleeing a forced marriage, terrified and injured but determined to be free. It continued with Samuel offering her a marriage built on choice and respect. And it ended, decades later, with a love story that had inspired everyone who knew them. A reminder that the best foundations for any life are freedom, choice, and love freely given.